It's not about just slapping a logo anymore.
You see AI also coming into picture. Yes. And a sense of originality is kind of losing its value. Welcome everyone to the first episode of Design to Dev, a Duelite exclusive podcast where we'll be talking to design experts and development experts across India and abroad. Our first member of this first episode is Gauri ma'am. Gauri ma'am has over more than 18 years of experience in design, marketing, and visual aesthetics. She's the co-founder of Atah Design, if I pronounce that right. Also, one of the founding members of Therefore Design, and also mentor at Stratus School in Bangalore.
Yeah. So I do like some teaching assignments at Strat.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, lovely. Thank you so much for joining us, ma'am. Really, really appreciate you having us here. So, how are you? How has been work recently?
The work has been quite exciting. So the last season of Atah is essentially a brand of porcelain products, and we focus on the Indian aesthetic through porcelain because that is something people have not tried. So generally, when you think of porcelain, the first thought that comes is all these cutlery, all these crockeries, which are very European or very Japanese. But the material has not been explored with an Indian aesthetic so far. So that was one of the thoughts. The other thing that we were trying to explore through Ataha was also that Indian objects like your diyas or your everyday objects, which have been a part of our culture, have never been looked from a different lens or through the lens of a different material. So that is something we wanted to explore with Ataha. And it's been an exciting journey. So we started in 2018, and this is almost the sixth season that we were doing. So uh, yeah, I mean, this year's collection was also received quite well. So yeah, it's been exciting.
I checked out the e-commerce platform, and it was amazing. Like, I really loved a few of the diyas, and I told you the mug, the Manthan mug.
Yeah.
I really like the illustrations, and that really shows how how simplicity requires skill, or how you don't need to add everything at once. You can have simple ideas, but then the execution is what actually brings out a beautiful picture.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. So that's something we like to sort of focus on because if you look at Indian objects or again, like when you say Indian aesthetics or Indian based home decor items or things like that, you the first thing that comes to mind is very bright colors, uh, very ornate objects. But that's something we're trying to kind of stay away from. So if you look at traditional things like traditional arts and crafts, they're not that heavy. But what kind of worked in the West is what's been selling so far. What is different about India is what people have been looking for and looking at. So I think it was time we sort of relooked at that perspective. So we are kind of inspired by different arts and crafts of India. So if you look at the second collection where we've done the birds, that was inspired by Gond paintings. So it's not exactly Gond paintings, but again an inspiration from that.
Okay.
So again, every time we do a collection, it's like a huge brainstorming that we do within our team. So what collection should we come up with? What story do we want to tell? Because again, every collection is about telling a story.
Absolutely.
And it's an opportunity to tell something that people don't know about. Again, like you said, Manthan, it's a forgotten story, I would say. We thought, I think it might make a very interesting conversation starter. Okay, I mean, why is there a snake on this mug? Or very interesting story. Like whatever, all the ratnas that came out of it. So every object we had in that collection sort of took off from there and became an object in itself.
The fact that you said it starts a story. I remember I was traveling from Bangalore to Jodhpur or something. And in Indigo, I was traveling from Indigo, and Indigo had started with their truth facts. Like they had two truths and one lie.
Right.
So you're still intrigued by it, what it is about, and that's definitely there. If there's a piece of object that has a rich illustration, a rich story to tell, it'll definitely ripple out
Yes.
in one way or another, in some conversation or the other. And that's, I think, a beautiful way of also bringing out awareness of our Indian culture and Indian heritage in a very different and a subtle, still beautiful way.
Absolutely. So I think Indigo is doing it very well. A lot of brands are kind of engaging consumers or customers through these kind of interactions. So it's not about just slapping a logo anymore. It's about people wanting to go deeper and closer into what the brand is about, what is the personality of the brand, and that's something. And especially like millennials and Gen Z, they don't want surface level service. They want to go deeper and understand brand values and things like that. So it is important.
Absolutely. And I also noticed, like, people, even competitors, are now trying to collaborate on like these banners. One is telling some other story and someone is
Absolutely, yeah.
that is also something that we see, because I think millennials or Gen Z or whatever my generation is known as, they're so much saturated of traditional media that you need a way out. You need real things. You need a actual sense of reality.
Yeah.
And not many people know this, but you've been a part of our insights and feedbacks initially when Duolite was just an idea of a design to code, and your insights actually helped a lot in our experience and our journey of what we are today. So your work around ADP list, I keep seeing some of the other LinkedIn post or 1000 mentorship minutes. I think that is incredible in itself. So yeah, I think we connected by that small conversation, 15-20 minute conversation online. I was in my Goa campus. You were in your home that time.
Yes. COVID days.
COVID days, exactly. Yeah, and then it's also about, you've been supporting our journey also as we go. I remember you reposted some, we were looking for a UI UX designer, and you reposted a LinkedIn post around that, and you've been also keep giving us some feedback or some connection here and there. So that's actually that's how I think your brand also, Atahar, today speaks about itself. It's like it's much more than a single thing. It's a ripple effect of a lot of thoughts and chains.
Rohan, one of the things that kind of works for us is collaborative design. So I think whether with Duolite, I think that's something you must be realizing already, is that it's not like olden days where you just work in a silo and you bring out a product. You need to constantly collaborate with like-minded people, and we need to be championing for each other. I mean, you can't really sit in a silo and say that I'm good and
This is
okay, this is my
I'll go beyond this.
absolutely. So it's not so much about mentoring, but it's there's so much I learn from ADP list. Like just talking to people who are from a very different time and space that than I was. I think it's extremely refreshing. I think people your age are extremely fearless about their expression and how they see design and what they want to do with design. So it's very interesting. I mean, it's always a great learning experience to sort of be on these mentoring platforms. I mean, it's just easy to make a distinction that, okay, hey, you are a mentor and you are a mentee, but I think it's always an exchange.
Right.
When it's beneficial, it's always an exchange.
Yeah, conversation is
It's
always
never a one way thing. So,
exchange of
yeah.
energies. Absolutely. And yeah, and so you told about you've been talking to so many aspiring designers or professional designers. What are few things that you see today that weren't there before, or vice versa, were there before but now it's fading? Like, I'll just give a example here. Like, you see AI also coming into picture,
Yes.
and a sense of originality is kind of losing its value we see one thing that pops up in social media and everyone tries to make 100 copies or 100 variants of it, not realizing the true depth of that originality. It's not just about AI. I think it's so many hyper competitiveness is there, so much कुछ भी चल जाता है and then people just start bugging around this. So what do you think aspiring designers should take note based on your experience or any past foundations that you still have that you want the next generation of designers to instill?
So again, I think I would like to divide the question into two parts. So AI or any digital media or a digital platform for that matter, what it helps you with is speed,
Okay.
and you can go wrong as many times as you want. The life of the medium itself is very short, and the way that medium or that artifact is consumed is extremely different from what designers did, let's say, even 10 years back. For example, if I'm to create a video or a post or anything digitally or a website for that matter, I mean, I can go wrong, and there is lesser to lose, I would say. Of course, there is always like a huge online impact that happens. I mean, you kind of get into a war of words over stuff, and then something just suddenly becomes a sensation overnight.
Yeah.
That apart, that can happen on offline things also.
Right.
But your scope for error becomes that much more, as in, you can just tweak something very easily, and with the help of AI tools or any digital tool for that matter, going wrong is easy, acceptable. Now, if you look at traditional design outputs like your car design or graphic design, which is sort of going on packaging or logos or things like that. So, I mean, let's say a Jaguar, if that's like the most burning example right now. So, they've released the identity, sure, but let's wait for it to actually translate to like a logo on the car, how it looks and all, because undoing that
Will be
will be massive. Like for, let's say, Gap to undo their mistake,
right.
it probably took less. But again, what industry you belong to, what is the impact that it has? I think these things, it matters. So again, I mean, what is the design being created for? What kind of consumption? What kind of media? I think that kind of plays a very critical role in determining, the use or the misuse of, let's say, a medium.
Right.
So,
No, so that's a very interesting way to put it. I never thought it like that. And I think that is what I've seen based on your journey and experience. I think that is why also you have like shifted more to packaging and physical form of media because like if I might be wrong here, but you feel that digital media like the handcrafted organic sense of anything that you build, be it even if it's a piece of drawing and then you said tweaking it and changing it, so the original sense of originality, like from where it started, it's lost. But when you create something that is physical, it'll always stay. Even if it's a scratch on this table, it'll more or less
yeah,
always
yeah.
stay. Something not is not done. So talking in that sense, I think is that fair to say that like experienced veterans like you in the design world are also thinking around physical media more than digital media because of the fact of the ability to withstand time or a much longer time horizon for the final artifact's presence.
To be very honest, we didn't think so much. When we, let's say, to speak about myself, when we started Defo, I mean, of course, I mean, there were websites and we did a lot of websites, but um, again, with a background at NID where, we studied a lot about printing and processes and things like that. Um, Elephant also had like a very strong um graphic design department where I worked extensively on packaging. So that's a legacy we sort of continued. Uh, Physical objects is something we've all been fascinated with. And of course, with times, we kind of moved to digital things and stuff like that. But again, I mean, like I said, it wasn't like a very premeditated thing that, okay, we want to create a legacy or anything like that.
Yeah.
But um, I think with digital mediums, I think there is good market or scope for both to coexist, because the more people are kind of spending time online, they also want to spend a lot of time offline, and they want to make their reality or their spaces or the physical products that they interact with that much more beautiful, because it's so easily possible digitally. That experience kind of needs to translate in an offline world as well. So if I mean, why cannot I have my desk to look like something that was just modeled in 3D? So people are so again, from a very consumer point of view, people are spending a lot more on how they live, how do their homes look. uh, so we thought, I mean, purely from a business point of view, there is still scope for people to pick up things of beauty
Right.
for their physical homes and stuff as well. And again, there has been this trend of people wanting to reconnect with their roots. So we thought, I think that's a good mix for us to sort of come in and say that, hey, this is a new interpretation of how traditions are, and this is our interpretation of what these objects of desire, I would say, can look like. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I have very two interesting examples. You talked about physical things of beauty. So uh, we started going on in at a cafes or restaurant with that QR thingy, but I never liked it. It's always that like, menu experience that you see and feel that you need. And even in the tech world, people of coding and traditional people, they're also moving back to physical keyboards. You see, $1,000 just keyboards because of that ASMR based keyboards.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for saying.
So there is that sense of button being button and actually things being clickable rather than everything being a flat screen. And one more, insight or this thing that came out of mind through our conversation is the fact that people are moving back to physical is also of importance because uh, there is so much saturation of content online that the engagement level per piece of content, even though the content will be Eiffel Tower or something very beautiful, it is reducing. And that's why I think even a simple glass of glass of water is still looked at as an interactable thing. And it's still, if you like, I personally love cold coffee, so if I see and I've spoken in many of my fun videos about drinking cold coffee from a steel glass rather than a simple glass, because that coldness or that texture or taste for me differs. So I think there'll always be that physical touch and exposure, no matter how much we become AR, VR, or augmented reality.
Yeah, because I mean, we are sensory beings, right? I mean, all our experience, all our lived experience are multisensorial. I mean, the touch, feel, smell, taste, it's all important to how we experience our world, how we experience objects. So, I think till the time we sort of are able to replicate these things digitally or through whatever experiences, uh, or even otherwise, even when that does happen at some point, we would, I think, human beings who would like to sort of connect with physical realities and, yeah, other human beings. Yes, absolutely.
No, no, that is very true. Moving out along, so I think we mentioned this a while back also. So, what are few of your learnings that you would like aspiring designers, be it in UI UX, especially because that's where we interact most of the time? what are few learnings that you think uh, are good tips for a successful career in design?
So I think this also draws on your previous question, the thing about UI and all the tools that are available. I think uh, while they help you fail fast at many fronts, it also helps you go extremely wide. As a designer, let's say, for me, in my time, I was always inhibited by, okay, who's going to be the developer? How is this design going to be developed? I did not know how to code. So the coding bit, that whole apprehension about coding and whatever. But now with AI, you just tell ChatGPT to do like certain things, and it gives you
Right.
code. So accessing things has become much easier. So as a designer or as a coder, accessing a spectrum becomes much easier. So you can go as wide as you want as far as design or any field is concerned for that matter. So any, let's say, coder trying to access design, again, with
Are you seeing this convergence? Like we've while building Dular, we've come on this hypothesis that especially on the enterprise side or on certain sides, designer and developers roles are converging.
you asked, I think that's a very interesting insight.
Yes. So what we're seeing, I'm sure you're aware of Figma, right? So
Yeah.
we're seeing Figma introducing more and more structural and programmatic thinking, like Figma variables or Figma auto
Correct.
layouting or Figma components and variants, which is very, very synonymous to how a developer actually understands code.
Yeah.
So we're seeing this. I don't know. It's a new field called UX engineer is also popping along in those
Yeah.
lines. So there's this convergence that we're seeing, because of which why we exist. And like you said, you can mention ChatGPT anything, and then it can convert into code, or it can convert into multiple UX copywriting or whatever it is. So I think awareness is very, very important if that's what your directive is for aspiring designers and developers altogether.
Interesting point. I mean, I think people are, yeah, uh, as in the lines are blurring somehow. But I think the point I would like to drive back to is that, yeah, there is a lot of exploration happening width-wise, but I think what designers also need to understand is depth.
Okay.
So people are not going deep. Like, again, I mean, a generation previous to mine would say that about how we approach design.
Okay.
But again, I mean, every designer or every generation is kind of a product of their times, their resources that are available to them, and the tools that are available to them. So I wouldn't judge, but to create something timeless, I think it's important for designers to also understand design or a tool or a medium in depth a little more, so that whenever that opportunity presents itself, they are able to sort of go deep and understand the whole iterative process of design. Because uh, let's say I want to create a poster and I just do it on AI. The iteration is being done back end. I mean, I'm not going through the process in my head. But when I'm presented with the opportunity to actually process that internally, I should be able to do that. So
Right.
that would essentially differentiate um, like a good designer and an okay designer, I would say. So wherever that depth is required, I think doing things offline, experiencing mediums in physical reality, I think that's important for every designer to sort of experience. So, I mean, great. I mean, you can create an illustration on Procreate with an iPad. You can experience watercolor, but again, you can go wrong as many times as you want. But once you've experienced watercolor in reality, the kind of understanding that you have, that, how do I go about doing a certain thing, it's very different. Maybe you might not be able to create a masterpiece like the famous painters and all, but the understanding still improves. So I think going through that journey uh, in anything, like acquiring depth in some skill or tool, I think that would be
I think
critical.
you mentioned a very interesting point, right? Not going and mastering a tool, but mastering the art on which the tool is built.
Yeah, I mean, mastering a tool again, it's how are you mastering how to learn, it's more about that. So approach again, the design approach is
And design, I think, is a very personal thing
Yeah.
in many aspects. You might approach even a simple poster differently than someone else.
Yeah.
So, and that's like, I think that coincides with your point of self, self learning journey of understanding your strengths. Where do you kind of find comfort in your designs field? And then there are 100 tools available to kind of execute that and iterate over that and make it faster.
Yeah, yeah.
And you mentioned that you don't know how to code and you were mostly on design, and like you've understood that design for you is a very in-depth and very personal bit. And when you were probably designing a UI UX and you know handing off to developers. So how was that experience like? How are those iterations? Because developers and designers, although they are converging in like enterprise UI or some small segment, they're still very different worlds today as we speak. So how was that experience like in terms of communication, making them understand that it's not just a few things that need it's the whole polished thing that add those all little details adds a lot of value in wholesome.
So again, designers speak a very different language, and programmers or coders, they speak a very different language. It's like a conversation between two people who do not speak the same language. So I mean, you're talking French and I'm talking, I don't know, Japanese, and even the syntax is very different. Like the way we understand information or we build a certain sentence is very different. So again, there was no conversation at one point. Now with no code platforms and things like that, people are looking at the same things a little more in a convergent way than a divergent way, I would say. So you have the same context while looking at design. I have a similar context while looking at design, so the conversation has become simpler.
Okay.
Right. So you could still, I mean, there were coders who empathized and who understood design, and they understood the value of design, and they were able to go the extra mile to kind of deliver on that. So I no complaints on that. But the thing is, again, vice versa, that sensitivity is low. That I've designed something, it has to kind of translate to something that works. That understanding was also not there amongst designers, that is this really possible? I mean, is it really possible to kind of take this to fruition? Is something that understanding was probably missing, that can this go online? That's always
It from
happened.
both fronts, like coders who empathize design, designers who also not empathize them, and but who understand
Knowledge.
feasibility aspects.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. See, I mean, you need two hands to
Right.
clap. So again, it's a problem of communication, and these platforms help people communicate better because you're kind of using the same artifacts to communicate. Right. Yeah.
And what keeps you know busy besides work, or what how is your daily routine besides work? How do you offload yourself as a
Three things keep me uh, busy,
okay
busy or interested or inspired. So one is uh, I love traveling. I mean, ever since I've exited, therefore, I have some time on hand, and I'm kind of trying to explore everything that life is sort of presenting me with. So I've been traveling quite a bit. Uh, I I'm quite deeply interested in yoga, so that's something I practice on a daily basis. and I kind of want to understand a little deeper. So I've been reading that up and practicing it as much as possible.
What exactly?
Yoga.
Yoga. Third thing.
Third thing, I'm to come to that. And third is like spending time with family, meeting people. So I think as an entrepreneur, somewhere I think I kind of got or as an entrepreneur, what happens is that you're so focused on the business that you kind of lose touch with what's happening around you and people, because you kind of, it's your baby and you want to kind of put it out there and you're so focused on that. So now, I mean, I kind of want to maybe make up for that and spend time with people, my parents, my daughter. That's on the personal front, but I'm trying to meet as many people like yourself, um, uh, and people from diverse fields, in fact, to just get a different worldview of things. Because, again, like I said, as an entrepreneur, sometimes what happens is you become too focused on a certain thing and you kind of lose a sense of what's happening apart from what you do. So I think I'm just taking time to kind of get in touch with interesting people. So that's something that really inspires me, and inspiration sort of comes from anywhere. So yeah,
You mentioned travel. Any underrated places that you thought were like average or but really turned out to be something else, or the experience turned out to be something very interesting?
I would say I've been to the overrated places more than the underrated, but I think the first place I traveled to was my hometown, and I spent about a week there. And uh, the experience of doing that in the childhood was extremely different with parents, where our mom used to take us every vacation. Chalo, bus mein baith ke jana re. And that was more of a thing that you did and you never thought about it. And there are all these experiences we had growing up with cousins and doing certain things. It was but you don't really give it so much thought. But uh, going to that place, going back there. So my native place is Sangli. It's in Maharashtra.
Okay.
So going back there, spending time with extended family, it's a very different experience as to how that place has changed over times. And yet, it's still such a rooted place.
Right.
And again, your point of view sort of changes from being a child and visiting that place to being a designer, being an entrepreneur, to see what opportunities lie there. It's very interesting. So I think that was a very refreshing experience for me. So yeah, I think while you should do like your Kashmir and your Japan and your, it's necessary. I mean, they're overrated or whatever, highly rated for a reason.
To Japan during their blossom season during March.
I went a little early, but there was this place called Kawazu near Tokyo where they bloom early. So I got to see the blossoms, but I kind of beat the crowds. So yeah, it's beautiful. But yeah, I mean, you need a bit of both. I mean, it's to balance out somewhere. So like roots and yeah,
Yeah,
aspirations.
I think I was watching Naval Ravikant. I don't know if you've
Yeah, yeah.
Naval Ravikant's podcast. So so he has this very interesting line that if you're so smart, why can't you, be successful while not hampering your personal life and being over anxious? That is obviously that's a very like utopian thing to say, but I think there is some value to that. And
Yeah.
as we age and you grow through experience, like you said, you like currently I'm in a phase that you know my startup is everything to me, and I have to pivot, iterate, do whatever it takes to just scale it up. I have
So I'm going to ask you a question now, Rohan. So what stage are you at?
I mentioned we have built the product. We're trying to scale. We are now building onto another standalone product. We see there was something I was about to come to, that you've seen through a lot of conversations of our customers and other insights that Figma to code like we do currently is a problem because of a the design. So like you said, it's still a very different world. Designers still don't design as per developer sort of standards. They're much more open and much more creative. And because of that, so if the design will be good, then only the product can actually deliver good code. And so that is something that we see as a ceiling as of now, that the design thing has to change. So either we build a product around that. And the other thing we've realized is there's a strong Figma dependency. Currently, whether you like it or not, it's a Figma plugin. And we have to move out of it. We have to do our own thing and make an end to end solution. Those are two things that we're kind of working on. We're looking for other insights and opportunities in like a standalone product or some very small use case that is an end to end thing. Like we're looking for an early win in that sense and moving out from here. So that is what I'm doing. I started this venture back in the day. It was a social media app initially, but things got out of place, and then we moved to a marketing agency. That also, so actually when we're doing marketing agency, we're designing websites and stuff. I met Prakhar, my co-founder. We did a lot of these freelancing gigs together, and therefore there we realized that the time it takes for a design to be converted to code is quite long and cumbersome, and the current tools are not that good. So currently we are really proud to say that our product, is being used by more than 20,000 users, and more than that, it is being used by mammoths such as TCS or for Medium or websiters. So all of these big agencies are using our product, and we're pixel perfect. So whatever the designer designs in whatever way, we just deliver a visually perfect output, something which our other competitor products were not able to do. And through this journey, we initially started with a Figma animation to code. I think that's what our initial conversation was all about. And that got a good traction. Like, we were posted in one of our reel of a influencer called as Nick Utensko. He's a Ukrainian UI UX influencer. So that blew up to 2 million views.
Yeah.
So that got us good initial traction. But the learning I have realized is product market fit, as you call it, PMF in abbreviation, is a moving target. You think you've reached there, and the customers demand, even especially in technology, move to another front.
Yeah.
So you have to adapt to that, and you have to change that. And another thing is, uh, you know you can get so many inorganically or organically ways to acquire users, but retention is one thing, especially in SaaS business and software as a service, which actually truly sticks. Even if you have 50 people, those 50 people are there to stay, and they're loving your product so much that they'll not move anywhere else in the world. That is your PMF.
That's your core.
That's the core. So that's the thing. And one thing I've realized in this journey is we need to look at people more than just bare numbers. So I'll give you a small example. I did a hire a few months back, and that person for me that time did not align to any technical skills or technical rules, but because of his enthusiasm and because of his charisma, I would say I got him in onboarded, and then he himself picked up so well in marketing and other kinds of product related roles that he became a co-part. And you never realize how so, and then you see from a passive perspective how that person has grown, and that is something that you feel
You
nice,
feel proud of
you feel
it.
proud about it.
Yeah.
You feel nice that we've been part of this journey of growth of this person. So I think people are very undervalued, especially young people, I feel.
Always.
And they need to, and we need to like realize that the time is, it's like a evolution thing. It's a learning curve. You'll if you keep hitting at it, either through one way or the other, you will reach the point that you wanted to reach. And even if not that point, you'll reach a point where you'll feel satisfied with your efforts. So I'm not saying that keep doing what you want to do randomly and expect miracles. You'll always have to be aware in business terms, in financial terms, if you're building a startup. But you have to have that drive, because if you see the core metrics of a startup as a business, it's fearful for any investor. But the potential is what keeps everyone in the team and the investor and everyone, bind it together. So that is what I've learned. And I think work ethic is something really important for me rather than even skill. So I've literally had people stay longer just because of their work ethic, because I believed in them. And sometimes it might be wrong, but then even after it did not turn out well, I feel that is a foundation on which good teams have to be built.
Absolutely. I think you've just passed your graduation. So, how has your experience been like hiring people? Do you ever face challenges hiring people with a certain skill who are maybe with a lot more experience, and you're kind of heading a company, and so you feel challenges on that front?
I'll tell you two aspects of this. First is the technical thing. So we have now started hiring by two fronts. One is, I think, I am shout out to whoever it is, but I think hiring platforms are a little overrated, according to me. They do a good job, and they do provide for a very good company. But in startup, you just don't need a skill set or a person. You
Yeah.
need you need jack of all trades.
Yeah.
So we've started either going through referral of someone that we know, because referrals always help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And secondly, what we've done is we've started like this. We are doing initially also because the product is a very intricate product. So we used to do these assignments. These were really hard assignments, like on a average basis. So I literally gave an assignment on all the developer aspirants on Covet, which is a tech hiring platform, of building a Figma plugin. And the funny part is, out of I think 300 or 350, only 2 or 3 actually made something out of it. The others were either they were not able to do it, or they sent me Figma designs,
No.
because they were not able to understand that they need to build a product and not an actual design. So I think a good assignment really cuts down this cuts down the rest of the people who are not that interested. And thereafter, obviously, after you've given an assignment and the person is interested, you also see the output. You see how well it is structured. And in the non-technical aspect, especially design, I think we talked about this earlier in this conversation also, is that uh, it's not about the tool, right? So I have had conversations with people who've done so many case studies as young designers, but who lack the fundamental visual identity that is required. And on the other side, I have a designer who I've known from very long. He works as a part-time basis whenever needed, but he's so trustable to me because of that sense of visual identity and the context, like you said, that if I give him something, I know I'll not need more than one iteration kind of finalize it. And that is the sake of convenience. You look as a
Yeah, it's like the sauce anarchy, ecloharchy kind of a thing. Like your explorations are multiple when you are kind of using all these platforms and things like that. But unless you know uh, what you really want or what the purpose of a certain thing is, you'll never know which kind of option to sort of tap.
yeah.
And that sensitivity comes when you kind of acquire depth.
And one interesting thing, like I am trying to inculcate in my everyday routine also, is are two things basically. One is the philosophy in design is also less is more. Less chaos, less detailing. Like simplicity actually speaks volume for me. Even if I'm planning my day, I'll not plan कि मैं ये भी करूँगा, मैं ये भी करूँगा, मैं ये भी करूँगा. I'll plan 3 things, but I'll do those 3 things really, really well. And the second sort of mantra you can say is no progress in any direction is better than progress in wrong direction. There's this economic phenomenon of, if we start something in between, we have this habit of completing it to the very end. That is something, like I told you, we build a social media app, right? And in between, we were having doubts. We should have stopped there and challenged ourselves and probably shut it down. But just because of the thing of completion, obviously there's a learning curve also when you complete something, and there's a satisfaction also. But as you grow, like you said, um, it is better to actually do something that is meaningful rather than just not sit idle. But what I'm trying to say is any progress in the wrong direction is wrong, that rather than zero. Negative is always lesser than zero.
Any as human beings lack or experiences that you have to keep moving, and it's very difficult to sit still with a problem. So um, I think most psychologists or yogis or whatever, I mean, these alternate mediums which are like non-medicine,
Right.
they tell you to kind of be in the moment and experience and things like that. I think those things are becoming more popular because we just, our instinctive reaction is to do, because it's like a how do you put it, action biased culture where action is valued in everywhere.
Okay.
Wouldn't you say that? As in, actions are more important than the thought or the experience.
In India, the hustle word or the hustle culture is too much overrated to a certain degree, that just doing something for the sake of doing is the fad or is the trend. But if you see developed countries, I'm not saying we are not in any sense less than them, but you see that there's, because of fewer people or because of fewer objectives, uh, there's a sense of stillness in them, I'll say, because uh, their philosophy is flourishment, and ours is kind of working hard and always working hard. Theirs is actually being happy. So I mean, we have in-depth literature around yoga and happiness and actually achieving that, but how many Indians do you see actually executing that? We're always like you live in Mumbai, you see is, I think, every day the city never sleeps.
But again, I mean, it's like at what part of the curve you are at, right? So I think we've, I mean, as a country, we've reached a certain part where, we've achieved certain things. I mean, your overall standard of living has gone up, so people's aspirations and all have changed. Absolutely. And it's a place where you can actually make things happen. I mean, and the growth is kind of happening here, so it's very attractive or very enticing to try and kind of tap onto something like that and do something. But I think it's a phase, and I think that phase has existed in every economy or whatever. So it's like, when a person ages, they behave a certain way. So it's like that. I mean,
Yeah.
we are a young ish nation.
Yeah, technically.
Yeah.
No, I think that hustle culture initially, if you, even if you're a country or you're a person, that is required for you
Yeah.
to actually go out. So uh, when some relative comes to my home and they say how was the bits education or what was different there, so I say it's never about the professors, the books. It's always about the peers.
Yes.
If I'm sitting idle, I'll be stressed out because the person who's sitting next to me is doing something, the person who's sitting behind me is doing something. So that, it's, I think, a positive. If you take it positive, it's a very positive peer
Yeah.
learning. And bits as a culture, what I've realized, especially the alum network, is so supporting.
Hmm.
I've had the opportunity to meet uh, the biggest SaaS software company, one of the biggest software company in India, Postman, which is a unicorn, their co-founder, because of the Bitsin Connect. And he was so happy and so friendly. And we had a 1 hour conversation. And he was so passionate that some Bitsins are doing something in this design to code that he's also enticed by. So it's a really, I think it's also collaborativeness. What I feel is, I think a better way to put it is, we should also prioritize interdependence as much as we do independence.
Yeah,
We have to realize
I
that,
think that's a very important thing. That's a very good insight.
right, that we can't do everything. We can't. We think we are superheroes or Batman and Supermans and Wonder Womans, but we're human beings and we can only build or scale collaboratively.
Yeah, I think that was a very important point that you kind of brought out.
Initially, I was also hesitant, whenever even a small thing goes off in the product is crashing or some client is complaining, the first thing instinctual reaction was, I'll go on the call, I'll figure it out. But then as you grow and realize, you have to realize the importance of delegation.
Yeah.
And give and accountability. I think that was the word I was missing earlier. Whenever we kind of hire, we have to see that the person who we are hiring, whether he or she has the sensibility of being accountable. With mostly we hire college people and they're buzzing with energy that we'll be working on this thing, we're working on this technology, AI and all of that. But when it comes to actually delivering things and going your very edge and even beyond, that is when I think people grow.
Absolutely.
So I think that was a really, really interesting way to put it. And I think we can end this conversation here of with the finally quote, interdependence is at priority than independence.
Then independence. I think that's a very important thing. So, collaboration is the way forward, as in no more sitting in silos and creating. So, yeah. And again, when we say interdependence, it's also about not just designers interacting with designers, but multidisciplinary collaboration is something that's probably the way forward.
I think that also requires a lot of patience, because you might see the stats that our average attention span is now lesser than of a goldfish. We are so much not patient anymore that we understand some problem. We understand like you said, the depth is becoming shallower by the day. We start designing something, or without understanding what the problem is, based on which we are supposed to, or the intention is which we're supposed to design. We start doing stuff rather than taking the time and the patience and understanding other stakeholders and the core brand identity or the problem you're solving, and going deep into it. I think that is something that I think we only come as we age. My white hair is still not there, but yeah, I think it was incredibly great to have you,
And it was lovely speaking with you.
and thank you so much for doing this. We've had a lot of iterations and a lot of ups and downs, but we finally made it.
Yeah.
And lovely, lovely talking to you, ma'am.
Yes. Lovely talking to you, Rohan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
See you.
And a big shout out to Pakpora, who's been very kind to host us and give us their offices.
I'll put up a logo here.
Big shout out to Duolite.
Yes.
Try it.
Big shout out to Ata. And when are you launching your next collection, or is still in
So there is always a collection in the pipeline. So yeah, I mean, this is around the time just post Diwali is when we kind of start working on the next connection for the next festive season, which kind of starts in August, July, August. So yeah.
Thank you so much, guys, for watching.
Thank you.